Hello everyone, this is Video Game Growing Pains, and I wanted to share with you a little obsession I've come across. I used to be obsessed with Hearthstone, now it's the darkest dungeon. Before I get too far into this though, I do want to apologize up front. There are a myriad of recording problems with Darkest Dungeon, and so mine only recorded about a fourth to a half of the screen. Still enough to give you some details and ideas about how the game works, but this is going to look a little crappy, and for that I do apologize. But I want to sort of share my experiences, so let's get right into it. Darkest Dungeon. Well, if you listen to this fine gentleman over my voice, you'll hear that the Darkest Dungeon is a place full of evil and very large vocabulary. It's a game which focuses on the descendant of a nutjob who opened up basically a pit to a Cthulhian nightmare, coming across his old home and trying to recruit adventurers to cleanse it. The game is a standard turn-based RPG for a lot of aspects, but it's also very roguelike. Your characters die permanently, and your upgrades to the town persist even if your characters have bit the bullet. The game actually does a lot of very interesting things. There is an incredibly large amount of atmosphere, the graphics are gothic, dark, very stylized, and the combat is relatively satisfying despite being very simplistic. So first, why don't we actually talk about what you can do. In your town, your estate, you're able to recruit new heroes. You can improve abilities they have, such as going to the camping specialist, the nomad, hunter, and survivalist, to improve abilities for when you camp. We'll talk about that. Abilities for when you fight. We'll talk about that. Get new armor, and relieve stress, and remove insanity. This is important because, like a lot of Cthulhian elements, your guys are going to go crazy in this place. It's a nightmarish hellhole. And, well, that's sort of the fun. Seeing how insane your characters will get, and trying to keep them going even after they've just gone completely cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. The combat is pretty satisfying, but we need to talk a little bit about the classes. I divided my classes based on some of the friends I have. I have a standard D&D group of friends who I decided to make into the Leper, the Plague Doctor, the Crusader, the Highwayman. We also have the Occultist, and we also have some Jesters, Grave Diggers, we have Vestals, Bounty Hunters. There's a whole lot of classes that you can do. I based all of them on my friends to give them a little bit more, give me a bit more attachment to them. And I've had a few deaths, sadly, but it's a lot like D&D in that you shouldn't let that get you down. You re-roll a new character for your friend, and you start off again. But still, you start off from scratch, so not only do you want your friends to not die, you want them to not lose all of the money you've invested in them. Combat is, like I said, standard turn-based, but you have 4 abilities per character and the ability to pass your turn and move. This is very important. Placement is insanely important in this game, as where you are in a 4-person lineup determines how effective your abilities are, how likely you are to be hit, and what abilities you can use. This is also the same with the enemies. You can screw around with their placement to make them weaker, or you can ultimately make them tougher. The enemy design here is very striking, very grotesque and gothic, especially some of the later bosses. What you're watching here, or seeing parts of, would be the Swine Prince. He absolutely wrecked me right after I stopped recording this. Isn't that lovely? But death is an inevitable part of Darkest Dungeon. The fun of it is seeing how far you can go and trying to keep your characters going, knowing when is enough and when it's time to retreat. I should have retreated from the Swine Prince, obviously. The graphics are very minimalistic. All you get to see for your attacks are a short splash image across the screen showing some graphics. It's not much, but it does add a little bit of flavor to the combat. There are a lot of different enemy designs, and, well, it's a lot of fun. Just throwing that out there. There are some problems with Darkest Dungeon, don't get me wrong. The music is not that great. It's very ambient. You want to actually feel the atmosphere, and it does a good job of building the atmosphere, but it's kind of meh and forgettable. The narrator, on the other hand, is a lot of fun. He is the only voiced character in the entirety of the game, but he will comment when your characters go nuts, when they find something. He gives a lot of flavor and atmosphere to what would otherwise be a semi-bland adventure. The backgrounds, the interactables, you can interact with just about anything in the game, and it gives you buffs, items, or it will drive you more and more crazy. Find an animal corpse? Maybe you can salvage meat from it. Then again, maybe it'll also give you disease because, you know, it's an animal corpse. And yeah, the game is pretty brutal and unrelenting. It uses a lot of roguelike elements of randomness and RNG to try and keep the difficulty high. You can stack those in your favor, but it does require a lot of grinding. That's another problem with it, is the heavy amount of grind on it. There's also a lot of areas that require polish. For example, the keys are very sticky when you're trying to type anything in, and so is the mouse. This is not just with my mouse, this has happened with all different kinds. So, yeah, there are some polish issues, especially with telling you what to do. For example, not all of your buffs are clear to you. You have a list of traits, some of which are good, showing that you are strong, some of which are bad, showing your psychoses and neuroses. But they aren't very well explained all the time. A lot of their things are not explained. You can use a lot of different items on things, but you don't really know which ones to use on. The game requires a lot of experimentation, patience, and some forum and wiki delving. It's a bit frustrating at times. Not everything is explained is pretty much the tagline of the game. The retreat option for both the dungeon and battles is so absurdly small and hidden out of place that unless you are desperately searching for it, you're never going to find it. It's a tiny, tiny white flag in the midst of a giant screen. Still, there is something insanely compelling about the game. Creating your own party and creating their own stories, building their friendship and relationships, it's a lot of fun. This is actually one of the things that feeds into the campfire. In the longer missions, you can actually rest at a campfire to buff yourself and regain stats. Your characters will talk about what they've done, and it gives you a chance to get connected to your cannon fodder, basically. This really is sort of the point of the game, is not just grinding, but making a connection with your cannon fodder and telling a story within a story. The Darkest Dungeon is all about trying to, cleanse the evil that your ancestor unleashed, but in the meantime, you're creating your own stories about how you've defeated necromancers and demon pigs and all other monsters. It's remarkably compelling and a ton of fun. I try and keep all of my friends alive as much as I can, though I'd have to admit, sadly, my friends Matthew, Evan, and Ryan bit the bullet recently. I have a new Evan, and I have a new Matthew, waiting to see if I can't get a new Ryan. Like I said, don't let death get you down. Death is only the beginning. We learn, we get stronger, we keep going, and eventually, the Darkest Dungeon awaits. This game is in early access on Steam, and is far from complete. There are a lot more classes promised, a lot more polish, a lot more items. Really, I'm hoping for the polish more than anything, because I like the game, but it does have a few tiny niggling little annoyances that could be addressed. And the recording issue is a problem. I'm probably not going to try and record this again. It's a pain in the ass to get this recorded. Even this little bit that I have. But Darkest Dungeon, it's about $20 on Steam as of this moment. It will be updated over the next 6 to 8 months. And if you're looking for a great D&D style game, a good gothic Cthulhian nightmare, or just something to kill some time as you grind out levels, I'd say it's a lot of fun. I can't deny that it's a great way to sink time. I've sunk 2-3 hours in it without even realizing that time's gone by, just in a snap. Darkest Dungeon gets Video Game Growing Pains' seal of approval. It's not polished enough and it's not finished, but, well, it's still pretty damn good. I don't usually do early access games for, reasons of polish, but this game's a bit of an obsession for me now. I really enjoy it. I enjoy the atmosphere, I enjoy the storytelling, and I enjoy my friends and I going out on adventures together. Anyway, that's all I got for this. I'm going to bid you adieu as I dive back in to the Darkest Dungeon. Later, everybody.